88.3 तेलुगु ट्रांसलेशन। आज अंग्रेजी में कथा होगा। जिन भक्तों को एफएमएस सुनना है या ट्रांसलेशन सुनना है, पीछे जगदीश्वर प्रभु है, प्रभु जी हिंदी में अनुवाद करेंगे। और अगर आपको एफएमएस सुनना है तो 107.3 में आपको एफएम का उपलब्ध है। తెలుగులో డివోటీస్ రామకృష్ణారెడ్డి ప్రభు ఇక్కడ కూర్చొని ఉన్నారు లెఫ్ట్ సైడ్. వినాలనుకునే వాళ్ళు అక్కడ వెళ్ళి కూర్చొని వినొచ్చు, లేదంటే మీ ఎఫ్ఎం లో 88.3 లో మీరు వినొచ్చు. సో ఈరోజు టుడే వీ హ్యావ్ హిస్ గ్రేస్ చైతన్య చరణ్ ప్రభు విత్ అస్. We are very fortunate to have Prabhuji's association. Hari Bol. So, there are many congregation members, those who are coming and telling that we are hearing Prabhuji's lectures from so many years, maybe a decade or 15 years. And today we have got the opportunity to see Prabhuji live and hear his lecture live in Hyderabad. So they have been telling us that, they are very grateful that, that we have invited His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu to our Hyderabad temple and given a chance for everyone to hear in live from Prabhuji. So we will have a small introduction of Prabhuji. Those who do not know about Prabhuji, His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, a mentor monk and a speaker. Prabhuji is a spiritual teacher for almost 25 years in the Bhakti Yoga tradition through its modern day expression, that is ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Prabhuji is author of 27 books that explain the relevance of Vedic wisdom texts, including the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. Author of the world's only daily blog on the Bhagavad Gita, gitadaily.com, where he has written some 4,000 articles on Gita. And Prabhuji is an invited speaker at TEDx, World Peace Conference, UNESCO, Intel, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, MIT, and Cambridge. And Prabhuji gives 400 talks across 100 cities in 4 continents every year. He is the author of 22 books, including Energy, Your Sutra for Positive Thinking, Science and Spirituality, Science, Recession, Why Do We Need a Temple, Frequently Unanswered Questions, and so on, Idol Worship and Ideal Worship, the Gita for Daily Enrichment. So today, you will have a book table at the end. Prabhuji has written many books. Those books are available there. And after the class, whoever wants to avail those books, you can take those books. And Prabhuji will personally sign that books and give you. That will be after the class. So we would like to welcome Prabhuji once by chanting loudly Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Am I audible to everyone behind? Okay, is this better now? Less echo? Can you still hear me? Okay, good. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashyatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for coming today. And we'll discuss today on a topic of great relevance to all of us, how Bhakti and Bhagavad Gita can improve our relationships. This is we'll discuss based on 12.15 in the Bhagavad Gita. I'll explain the verse and we'll recite it a few times. So Krishna is saying over here, Yasman, by whom na udvijate. not disturb, lokan. So that person who does not disturb others. Yasman no dvijate loko. And then conversely, lokan no dvijate chayah. That people are not disturbed by him. That person is not disturbed by people, and people are not disturbed by him. Lokan no dvijate chayah. And then Krishna lists some of the typical disturbances. Harsha, that when somebody does what we want them to do, then we feel very happy. Yes, I did it. I changed this person. And the person does the opposite of what we want them to do. And Amarisha, we become dejected. And then there is Bhaya. What is this person going to do? I don't know. That's insecurity. Bhaya, Udvega. Udvega is dejection. Sometimes we just lose hope in people. Just we become cynical, cold. We close our heart. So Vegair. All these are Udvega is the anxiety that comes from all this. So Harsha, Marsha, Bhayo, Dvegair. Mukto, one who is free from such a panorama of emotion. Yaha, such a person, Chame. Chame, certainly such a person is Priyaha, is dear to me. So Krishna is telling, such a devotee, such a person is dear to me. Yaha Sachame Priyaha. Sorry, Mukto Yaha Sachame Priyaha. Yasmano dvijate loko. Lokano dvijate chayaha. Harsha marsha bhayo dvegai. Mukto yah sachame priyaha. Yasmano dvijate loko. Lokano dvijate chayaha. Harsha marsha bhayo dvegair. Mukto yah sachame priyaha. One last time, all of us together. Yasmano dvijate loko. Lokano dvijate chayaha. Harsha marsha bhayo dvegair. Mukto ya sachame priyaha. So I'll use this as a whiteboard to draw or write certain things. So I'll talk broadly this class in 3 parts. First is, I'll talk about how Bhagavad Gita 8 changes our conception of relationships. That it brings a new view for us in our relationships. Then the second point is how this conception, if misapplied, it can actually worsen our relationships. We're going to talk about how it should improve, but if it misapplied, it can worsen our relationship. And then, if it is understood properly, then how it can improve our relationships. So let's look at these 3 points one by one. Now, what is this verse saying? If we can consider this is one person, this is me, this is the other person. So now the nature of the world is that sometimes the other person disturbs me. And sometimes I disturb the other person. And this way, together, we create a disturbed world. And, okay, this is a disturbed world. You see, there are different kinds of distresses in the world. Hmm. But quite often, the interpersonal distresses, they they hurt us the most. Like if there's a storm and maybe their property is damaged, that's painful. That's distressing. But that doesn't hurt us as much as, say, if some friend or some relative speaks some harsh words, insults us, or worse still, if somebody betrays us, backstabs us. In general, among the three kleshas, which are the three kleshas? Adhyatmik, Adibhautik, and Adidaivik. So if you consider this is the soul, basically the soul is situated in three circles. The soul is situated in the circle of the body, then the soul is situated in the circle of society, and then the soul is situated in the circle of, we could say broadly, nature. So these three circles are all needed for the sheltering and functioning of the soul. Without our body, we cannot function. We are social creatures. We need society. We can't live without that. And if nature provides us heat, light, air, water, we can't live without that. So these three circles, in one sense, they shelter us. But at the same time, all these three shelter things, so at one, they all offer us shelter in some ways. They all offer us support in some ways. Shelter, support. But all three circles also cause distress. So from nature, there could be calamities. From the body, there could be diseases. From people, there could be misunderstandings, there could be betrayals. So all three can cause distress to us. Now, while all three can be bad, if we get some terrible disease, that's painful. If a storm or a natural disaster comes, that's painful. But quite often, in these times, how people behave, that hurts us even more. Now, if somebody gets a sickness, and at that time, if friends and family come and offer support, we feel some solace. But if somebody gets sickness and nobody even calls to ask how you are, and quite often sickness gets aggravated by that. When people are lonely, then that affects people much more. So in one sense, relationships, you could say this circle is the most important. There's a lot of research about science and spirituality now. So there's one paper provocatively written, it says, as where science and spirituality kiss each other. Now, what is the idea kiss? They said basically what they found was that when people are sick, if they have loving people around them, they recover faster. If somebody is their loving support system, then they're constantly affirming, encouraging, empathizing, then people recover from sickness faster. But if they're alone, so for them spirituality is not exactly soul and God, but it is like affection, something more than physical. That's their idea of spiritual. So the medicines cure, but they say that the social support system also matters. So now among these three, in some ways, if the body falls sick, we can try to take care of health, we do exercise, we take proper diet, that's important. With nature, we try to live in harmony with nature, but those two are not so much in our control. The body sickness, what can we do if it comes? But how we humans deal with each other, this is the most in our control. And that's why this Adi Bhautik Klesh, we can try to minimize that, and we will find if that can be minimized, then many of the other problems of the world can be lessened in their impact. And that is what is one big contribution of spirituality. It should be. So many times in Vedic programs at the end, people say Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now the Shanti is said 3 times. Now why 3 times? Because it is actually these 3 kleshas. Om Adhyatmik Klesh Shanti. Om Adi Bhautik Klesh Shantihi. Om Adi Daivik Klesh Shantihi. So all these three kleshas are coming, they are making us ashanta. They are making us distressed. So let them be pacified. So what Krishna is telling in this section and this verse, in the 12th chapter, does anyone know how many verses are there? Okay, somewhere in between the two guesses. 20, yes. So among the 20 verses, 13 to 20 is a series of Krishna says qualities that endear a devotee to him. That means if a devotee has these qualities, such a devotee becomes very dear to me. And it's significant in one sense, none of these qualities are about devotional activities. Not one of them. Krishna doesn't say that a devotee who wakes up in the morning and chants Hare Krishna early in the morning, that devotee is dear to me. Krishna doesn't say somebody who has an altar in their home and worships the deity, that person is dear to me. And that is true. No doubt devotional activities are important. But what Krishna is emphasizing here is not devotional activities, but it is behavioral characteristics. Behavioral characteristics. How do you behave with each other? So, how do you talk with each other? How do you behave with each other? So, he says that those devotees who behave properly in their practical life, they are dear to me. They are dear to me. So, when Srila Prabhupada was asked, how do we know your followers? At that time, his followers were mainly his disciples. We didn't have grand disciples at that time. How do you know your disciples, followers? Now, Prabhupada could have said, they follow the four regular principles, they chant 16 rounds. But Prabhupada didn't say any of those. Prabhupada said, they are perfect gentlemen and ladies. Perfect gentlemen means they are well behaved. They are well behaved. So quite often, nowadays, there's a lot of people who are spiritually inclined, but they call themselves as spiritual, but not religious. Has anyone heard about this group? Spiritual but not religious? Yeah. So especially the modern young people are like that. See? Now why? Because they say religion is all about, do this, don't do this, believe this, don't believe this. But their mood is, don't tell me what you believe. I don't really care what you believe. Their mood is, show me how you behave. So, if they see that a person's behavior is they're polite, they're helpful, they're kind, then I want to become like you. I want to know what you are about. So this idea of the importance of our behavior, not just our devotional activities, they are important, no doubt. But Krishna is emphasizing that those devotees, that this idea of the behavior being important, Krishna is emphasizing it, Prabhupada has emphasized it, and that is the contemporary ethos also. I don't care what you believe. There are so many people who believe so many things, and often people fight over. There are many people, there is one group of people that when in America and the Western world, you ask people, what is your religion? So now there is a group called nuns. These are not nuns. They are different. They're not religious nuns. They are nuns. Nun means I don't care for religion at all. Their idea is, you people believe something about the other world, and because of that you fight in this world. So we don't care for you. That's why don't tell me what you believe. Show me how you behave. So that is very important in a practical sense. So now this behavioral attribute, Krishna talks about various verses in the Bhagavad Gita, in section 13 to 20. But among those verses, even this verse is special. In all the other verses, Krishna is saying, Yo mad bhaktah same priya, bhaktiman yah same priya. Such a devotee is dear to me. It's interesting, in this verse, Krishna doesn't mention bhakta at all. Yaha sachame priyaha yasman no dvijate loko lokan no dvijate cha yaha harsha marsha bhayodvegair mukto yaha sachame priya. So in this 12:15, there is no reference to devotee at all. That means Krishna is saying that even an average human being who may not be a devotee, if that person is acting in a way that they don't disturb others and they don't get disturbed by others, then even that person will become dear to me. That means for Krishna, how important this point is can be understood. So Krishna is in a sense that he is saying that the way you behave is that don't be disturbed by how people are acting, and conversely, don't disturb. If you can do this, you will be dear to me. Even if you're not a devotee. If you're a devotee, then so much more you will be dear to me. So this is important in our devotion. Now how... Okay, is there some sound? Okay. I should follow and not be disturbed. I'll try. Okay. So now, when we talk about devotion and not being disturbed by our devotion, if you're practicing devotion with others, what does it mean? Let's try to understand this, that broadly speaking, our spirituality, it does something for us. It helps us understand that in every relationship, there is a third person. There's I, and then there is the other person. And who is the third person? That's Krishna. So what that means is, I have my relationship with the other person, I have my relationship with Krishna, and Krishna has the relationship with the other person. Now all these relationships are two-way. All in general, love can be one way, but a relationship has to be two-way. So there are two ways, broadly speaking. So bhakti helps us. First point I talk about is we emphasize that there is another dimension to the relationship. That how we relate with others is important in our bhakti. So we could consider, let's say, our relationship with Krishna is 1, our relationship with the other person is 2, and their relationship with Krishna is 3. So this is the first broad point about how getting a bigger picture of relationships. So here Krishna is telling, sometimes we think bhakti means to become detached. Detached means not care for others. But if we don't care for others, often we will disturb others. Isn't it? And Krishna is saying, don't disturb others. Sometimes devotees can become very hard-hearted. So I'll talk about how bhakti, this is the first point I talk about, conceptualizing the relationship. Now the second part I talk about is how Bhagavad Gita and bhakti, if misapplied, what it can do? It can worsen our relationships. So let's see how that can happen. The second part, so misapplied, it leads to the worsening of the relationships. And by understanding this, we can try to avoid this pitfall. So the first is that there is what you can call as artificial detachment. Artificial detachment means what? This is Krishna, this is my relationship with the other person. So, sorry, me you could say, and then this is the other person. So basically, this one diagram is going to summarize the entire class. If you remember this one diagram, you'll be able to remember a lot of things. So the way I'm going to explain is, one way it may disturb is that we may reject to itself. At my relationship only with Krishna, I don't care for you. Well, that is artificial. So, in the early days when we were introduced to bhakti, now we used to have uh, horror stories of how not to share Krishna consciousness with others. How not to preach, how not to share. So now there is the story of Chitraketu. The Chitraketu had a son. What was his name? Harshashoka. And Harshashoka passed away. And then after that, Harshashoka was called back by Narad Muni because Chitraketu was in such lamentation. And then what did Harshashoka say? You called me back? Which mother, which father are you talking about? He said, I've had so many mothers and so many fathers. He said, that created great detachment in Chitraketu. So we had one young devotee boy. He heard this class and he was staying in the hostel. He went back home and his mother had cooked some nice food for him. And he said, I don't care which mother, which father. I have had so many parents. Now, this is not just heartless. It is heartless, but it is also headless. Why? Because when does Harshashok say this? It is after that relationship has ended. It is that life has ended. Now the soul is on the next journey. At that time, okay, I've had so many lifetimes, I've had so many parents, so many children, so many spouses. But when you are in that relationship, you cannot reject that relationship. You cannot trivialize that relationship. Now, when we are in a relationship, we have to act responsibly. We have to act sensitively. So, if we just become uncaring or hard-hearted in the name of being spiritual, we're not being spiritual. We are actually just becoming cold-hearted. And in some ways, this can happen when people become, say, irresponsible. When I travel across the world, there are wonderful stories of I hear about how devotees are, say, practicing bhakti wonderfully and doing extraordinary things. So, and there are also horror stories that I hear. So now I'm in one particular place I'm at, and this preacher was introducing me to young devotee, and he says, he's such a serious devotee. He said his wife was not ready to become a devotee, so he divorced her. Now, when I heard it, I was triple horrified. Not just horrified. First of all, first horror is, Krishna, our purpose as bhakti is not just to dismiss and destroy relationships. Prabhupada's wife was never a very serious devotee. But still, Prabhupada took care of his family responsibilities for 30, 40 years. Only at the end of his life he renounced. So first horror is that somebody as a devotee will do this. The second horror is that a preacher is proud of this. And the third is, you not only are proud, you are actually advertising it as a sign of serious devotion. It's horrible. It's our bhakti should not lead to us becoming cold-hearted and hard-hearted. So our bhakti, we should see, okay, that person may not be a devotee, but I have a responsibility and I should be doing my responsibility properly. So if you become cold-hearted, that's a big problem. See, there is a difference between, in bhakti when we talk about detachment, see, detachment is not being cold-hearted. Cold-hearted means we just don't care. It is being clear-headed. Clear-headed means we have an understanding of our priorities. And priorities means that we have various relationships in this world. And if you consider the 1, 2, 3, it's not just a numbering system. It's also a priority system. That our 1 should be more important than 2. That does not mean one has to reject two. That means, okay, if my family is not practicing bhakti, and okay, but they should not stop me from practicing bhakti. I have to create some space for myself. If they don't like my chanting, then don't chant in front of them. But you can go for a walk and chant. You can be a little more discreet and practice your bhakti. If they want to eat meat, it's not that they are going to force open our mouth and thrust meat into our mouth. No, that's very unlikely. So we make sure, clear-headed means that we make sure that our relationship with Krishna is given due importance. But that doesn't mean we reject all other relationships. That is where Prabhupada says there has to be affection. Prabhupada talks about this in 13:8 to 12 purport. Aratir anabhiswanga putradara grahadishu, in that purport. He says affection and attachment. They're two different things. And especially when you talk about don't be attached. When you talk about especially unhealthy attachment. What does it mean that don't be attached in an unhealthy way? When somebody has an unhealthy attachment, what it essentially, one sentence can summarize an unhealthy attachment. That means, I can never say no to you. Now, if it is like that, Dhritarashtra could never say no to Duryodhan, whatever Duryodhan did. And that's why Dhritarashtra also became a terrible person. So now in every relationship, sometimes the other person is forcing us to do something against our values. We should be ready to say no. But that doesn't mean we always say no. That doesn't mean we reject the relationship itself. So if we become hard-hearted, that will be very dangerous. See, there is, to some extent, when we are practicing bhakti, sometimes the Mayavadi influence comes into our bhakti practice also. See, in Mayavad, especially as it is conventionally understood, Mayavad is focused a lot on detachment. But bhakti, the emphasis in bhakti is not detachment, it is service attitude. The essence of bhakti is not how detached you are. Jivera Swarupa hai. Yes, the Swarup of Jiva is we are the servants of Krishna. Jivera Swarupa hai sarva vastu virakta. That is not our definition. That detachment is not the defining characteristic of a devotee. Service attitude is the characteristic. So this is one way. If we just become cold-hearted, we may alienate people. So I was with one devotee family, and he had a young daughter, very intelligent girl. And she was telling that ever since my mother has become a devotee, her mother was telling me that she is not practicing bhakti. Can you talk with her? So I started talking with her. She said, after we talked for some time, she opened her heart and she said that ever since my mother has become a devotee, I feel as if I have to compete with Krishna for my mother's love. That my mother all her time is with Krishna and she has no time for me. Now that should not be happening. No, we have our bhakti, but we have our relationship with our family. So we need to be able to balance that. So if our loved ones start feeling alienated, then that is not healthy. That's one way. One way our bhakti can worsen relationship is if we reject or trivialize or minimize too. The other way bhakti can worsen our relationship is if we try to force three. Force three means what? I am a devotee and what I want is you should also become a devotee. So the other person is here. This is my relationship with Krishna, my relationship with the other person, and is their relationship with Krishna. Sometimes we think that now I have become a devotee, I want to make all my family members into devotees. Yeah, that's a wonderful desire. But every soul has free will. So one danger could be, as I said, we trivialize or minimize this relationship. The other danger could be we force this relationship. That means we start forcing the other person to practice bhakti. Now, when we do this this can very easily backfire. See, now everybody to some extent for their spiritual growth needs to pushing. Pushing means, we invite somebody, please come to a temple for a program, please join this, please come here, please do that. So pushing is good. We invite them, we remind them, we give them some opportunities. But there's a difference between pushing and forcing. So pushing is more inspiring, encouraging. Forcing is, you have to do this. When we force, then what happens? Then that person actually becomes alienated from Krishna. Now, in our first generation, we had most of the devotees, first generation means Prabhupada disciples, almost all of them stayed in the temples. And many of their children went to Gurukuls. And they had this idealistic idea that, my children should become great devotees. And yes, all parents can have nice expectations from children, and that's good. But there's this one Gurukuli boy, as a very intelligent person, smart person. I was talking with him. He is favorable to bhakti, but not a bhakta now. So I was asking how his childhood was. This is in American boy. So he said that my defining memory as a child, when we look back at our life, there are so many events that happen in our life, but some memories stay stuck in our head. So he says, my defining memory as a child is my parents' constant disappointment that I was not the reincarnation of Prahlad Maharaj. That I was not a devotee like Prahlad. Now, Prabhupada himself, if you see, when his father, he wanted toys, and his father got a gun for him, and he said, I have 2 hands, I want 2 guns. And he insisted, started crying. So now, of course, we talk about Prabhupada as a small child, as Abhay performing the Rath Yatra, and he did that. But he was also a child. Children will play. Children will be children. We want children to be devotees, but we can't stop children from being children to be devotees. Isn't it? Children will be children first, and then they can be devotees. So if we force them, then they may follow. Because as long as they're small, they're under the control of the parents. But as they grow older, they'll become teenagers, they'll become adults, and they will not only stop practicing bhakti, they will become anti-bhakti. So our purpose as parents should be to give our children happy memories of bhakti. So that is the most important thing. How many rules they follow, all that is important, but that's not how many rounds they chant, what time they wake up, what kind of food they eat. All that is important, but most important is give them happy memories. Happy memory. When I went to the temple, I would dance in kirtans. We performed this drama, and I dressed up in this way, and I acted, and everybody clapped. And I did this performance. I sang or I danced, and that is what they should remember. And they remember that, those memories will draw them toward Krishna eventually. When they grow adults, then they grow into youth and adults, it is they who have to choose. And if we do this, then we have done our duty. If we insist on specific practices, then that can be counterproductive. It's possible that some kids may love, some kids may chant a lot of rounds, some kids may wake up in the morning, early morning, and that's nice. Okay. You can take it away. So that's nice if they do it, but that's not necessary. We should not be putting unhealthy pressure on our children. And I was in one community in America. Many of the Indians who go to America, they're already brilliant people. You can't really go to America and succeed there unless you are good. And often the husband and the wife, they both have brilliant genes. Their child also is brilliant. So there was this one girl, I have this online Bhakti Shastri course. Now there are many Bhakti Shastri courses available. There's an online Bhakti Shastri course. And this girl, at the age of 12, she completed the entire course. And she gave the exams and she graduated. Had a big celebration in the community. And they came, when I went there, they asked me to give her some gifts and speak something about her. So I was very appreciative. But at the same time, I cautioned the parents there. I said that, no, she is, I talk with her parents also, probably her IQ must be 155, 160, something like that. Very high. 160 is a high IQ, isn't it? It's a very high IQ. 160, 165, 160, very high IQ. He says, I told the other parents, he says, she can manage her studies and also do Bhakti Shastri. That doesn't mean all parents should start expecting from their children that their children should also do Bhakti Shastri. Different children have different capacities. And Bhakti Shastri is difficult. It's not easy. So, sometimes there may be unhealthy comparison. And that can cause unhealthy pressure. So, when there is pressure, then that is a problem. Now, with respect to children, it can happen. It can also happen with respect to our spouses, our siblings, our parents. When I was introduced to Bhakti, and I asked Jayadvait Maharaj, how do I preach to my father? I had lost my mother when I was quite young, so it was only my father. So how do I preach to my father? Jayadvait Maharaj immediately replied, by letting anyone except you preach to your father. He said, there is a particular dynamic in a relationship. So till that time I was preaching to my father and my father was not at all interested. And then I just got out of the way actually. I just introduced my father stays in Nasik. So I introduced him to the local temple over there and he found some people of his own age group, some his like-minded. And he started going to the temple and he started he's practicing bhakti at some level. And he started going to the temple, he started dancing in kirtans, he started liking it. And then he realized when the devotees there sent me a video of my father dancing in kirtan. I said, if I had told him to dance, he would not have danced. So I realized that for my father, I was not the way to Krishna. I was in the way to Krishna. So I got out of the way and then he came to Krishna. Now, so sometimes when we are trying to share Krishna Bhakti with others, so what happens is, if we try to force, there is the dynamic of our relationship with that person. The two that is coming in, then the three, how it will work, we don't know. If it's with our spouse, sometimes the wife may be practicing bhakti, the husband may not be practicing bhakti. And we may want them to practice bhakti. But what happens is, if, again going back to this diagram, there is Krishna, me, and the other person. So how things may happen is that if I put too much pressure on the other person, come to the temple, chant Hare Krishna, don't do this, don't do that. Now when there is too much pressure for that three, that creates tension in our relationship with that person. And when there is tension in a relationship that is important for us, that creates a disruption in our relationship with Krishna. If there's a lot of tension in our family, in our home, and then we sit down to chant Hare Krishna, we just had some unpleasant words with somebody. You sit down to chant, how much can you focus? It's very difficult to focus. So, when there's too much pressure, it actually affects everything negatively. So, the idea is that when we don't pressure the other person too much. Don't pressure means what? That we open the door to Krishna for them. But we don't impose too much on them. In every relationship, basically there's reciprocation. Reciprocation means that, say, I do something for that person, that is my contribution. in that relationship. And then there is my expectation from the other person, isn't it? So I do something for you and I expect something from you. So if we do not understand devotion properly, then misapplied devotion, what it does is our contribution in the relationship goes down. Because, I have to go to the temple, I have to do this, I have to do that. Oh, this party is just mundane. Maybe you might be going to, maybe doing so many activities together. You say, all these are mundane, I don't want to do those activities. So what we do in that relationship, the contribution goes down. And then the expectation goes up. He says, you should be doing this, you should not be doing this. And generally, in any relationship, if we feel that what I am getting from this relationship is way less than what I am giving, then the relationship becomes strained. If I feel my contribution is a lot and the reciprocation from the other person is very little, then that creates a strain, that creates a tension in the relationship. I am doing so much for you, why not doing anything for me? Unfortunately, this is what we do with the other person. This is what we decrease the contribution in the relationship. Oh, this is all mundane. And we increase the expectation. You should not do this, you should not do that, you should not do that. And then this can cause so much damage in the relationship. So, if that other person is not ready to practice bhakti, then okay. Now, we shouldn't think that we have to bring them to Krishna. It is, Krishna is in their hearts also. They may not have a relationship with Krishna, but Krishna has a relationship with them. So in their relationship, consider Krishna and the other person. Now, there may not be any relationship from their side, but Krishna has a relationship with them. So, Krishna always has a relationship with every single person. Because Krishna is Sarvasya Chaham Hrudi Sannivishto. He is present in everyone's hearts. Krishna is Bhakta Vatsala, but he is also Suhrudam Sarva Bhutanam. He is the well-wisher of everyone. That means they have a relationship with Krishna. I sometimes give a talk on this topic. God does not believe in atheists. Is something wrong over here? Normally, what do we say? Atheists don't believe in God, and God returns the favor. Now, what does it mean? That means that God sees beyond the atheism of the person. See, if every living being is a soul, around the soul there is a mind, around the mind there is a body, and above it all is Krishna. So now, if we consider the soul, mind, body, now atheism is just a misconception in the mind. And when Krishna sees beyond this mind to the soul. So Krishna has a relationship with everyone, even with atheists. And that's why, rather than thinking, I have to make this person a devotee, that Krishna has a plan for this person. And service attitude means, how can I act? How can I contribute? How can I serve Krishna in his plan to bring this person to him? So that way, don't put too much force on the other person. If we do that, so if we try to either we trivialize the second relationship, or we try to force the third relationship, that in that way, bhakti can make things worse. Then we start thinking, This can seem quite scary and unnerving. And how can bhakti make things better? That will be the last part we'll discuss. So Krishna is saying that don't disturb others and don't be disturbed by others. So first I'll talk about how to not be disturbed by others. So for all of us, see, if I am here, as I said, I have a relationship with the other person and I have a relationship with Krishna. Now, this relationship, it is temporary, but at the same time, it is important relationship while it exists. And this is our eternal relationship. Now, what bhakti is meant to do for us is that, see, through every relationship gives us an identity, isn't it? So, for example, if I have a child, then I become a parent. If I have a spouse, then I become a husband or a wife. If we are born, then we are sons or daughters. So every relationship gives us an identity. And the identity from that relationship is important. But we have an identity and we have, you could say, identification with that identity. I'll explain the difference between two of them. The identity and identification with the identity are not the same thing. Say for somebody whose lifelong dream was to be an engineer. And if they become an engineer, then that I'm an engineer becomes a very strong part of their identity. But that person, okay, I want some job, I want to have some financial stability, and engineering happens to be that job. So for them, they are an engineer, but that's not a very important part of their identity. Okay, if tomorrow I find out that maybe a management career is better, then I might become a manager. I'm no longer an engineer. So if we identify too strongly with an identity, then the loss of that identity is very damaging. But if we don't identify too much with an identity, like some people say we are all Indians. Now, when we go to America, somebody might get an American citizenship. They might get American citizenship, but still, they very strongly identify with India. I'm American, but I'm American Indian. Now others, they may not have much patriotic sentiments, and they don't identify much with India. So they want to become more and more American. There's different kinds of people. The point I'm making is, with our identities, we have different degrees of identification with the identity. So the key question is, which identity do we identify with the most? So if I identify very strongly with an identity, and if I lose that, or if there's some disruption in that, if my defining identity is that I'm an engineer, and then I lose my job as an engineer. Now maybe I can get in some other job, I get a job as a manager, or I get a job as a supervisor or something like that. But I feel a gnawing sense of loss because I'm no longer an engineer. So the key point I'm making over here is that when we are practicing bhakti, we have multiple identities. We have the identity as, see, our identity is multi-level. There is what you can call as functional identity. Functional is vyavaharik identity. And then we have a fundamental identity. So our functional identity may be based on our gender. I'm a male or a female. Our functional identity may be based on our age. It may be based on our marital status. I'm single, I'm married. Our functional identity may be based on our parenthood. I'm a parent, I'm not a parent, I'm a grandparent. We have various identities. But below all of these, we have a fundamental identity. And the fundamental identity is that I'm an Atma. I am a part of Krishna. So for us, our fundamental identity is the identity with which we should identify the most. So who am I? I am a servant of Krishna. I'm a part of Krishna. And as a part of Krishna, I have a functional identity. So I may be a husband or wife, I may be a parent, I may be a son or a daughter, I may be an Indian citizen, I may be a man or a woman. So the idea is, the way we function is, this is me, this is Krishna. And we have various functional identities. As I said, we may be belonging to a particular country. So we have our marital identity, marital status. We have our job. We have our parenthood. We have our nationhood. So what it means is, as a husband or wife, I serve Krishna. As a software engineer, I serve Krishna. As a mother or father, I serve Krishna. As an Indian or American, I serve Krishna. As a man or a woman, I serve Krishna. So all our functional identities, we link with the fundamental identity. So why is this important? This might seem a little abstract, but I'll make it simple in a minute or two. That where do we get our shelter? That is important. So suppose there is say a cloth shop, and in that cloth shop a customer comes in, and now there is an attendant. So the attendant is, normally the attendant will show various clothes to the customer. So normally speaking, when a customer comes in, if there are multiple attendants, they all will want to approach the customer so that they can make a sale. But there are some customers who are quite difficult. Broadly, there are two kinds of people. Some people bring happiness wherever they go, and some people bring happiness whenever they go. So they are just so irritable, so complaining, so annoying. So suppose this customer happens to be in the second category. So now attendant just wants to go away, but there's no one else, so the customer attends. The attendant attends to the customer. Now the customer is very demanding, very complaining, very disrespectful. At that time, it's easy for the attendant to snap back at the customer, to maybe yell at the customer, to be rude. But if here the boss is sitting and there are CCTV cameras everywhere, now the attendant is seeing the customer, attendant is seeing how the customer is impolite. But the attendant knows that my primary relationship is not with the customer. That customer will come and go. My primary relationship is with my boss. My boss is who's going to give my salary to me. So the attendant will be polite even if the customer is rude. And who knows, the customer may look for 100 clothes and not buy anything and still go away unhappy. But if the boss is watching, the boss may come and then tell the attendant, hey, you can maintain your cool nicely. You know how to deal with difficult people, difficult customers. Says, I will make you in charge of this entire wing and you train other attendants. How they can deal with difficult customers. So basically, if you consider in this particular interaction, what happened was, this is the primary relationship. This is the secondary relationship. And in one sense, in the secondary relationship, there's failure. Failure means the customer did not buy anything. The customer also went away unhappy. But in the primary relationship, there is success. Because the boss is pleased. The boss gives a raise, the boss gives a promo. So now, how did this happen? Because This attendant kept the primary relationship primary and didn't let the secondary relationship affect the primary relationship. You remember I said detachment means what? To be clear-headed. Clear-headed means what is more important, I give more importance to that. What is less important, I give less importance to that. So similarly for us, we are talking right now about how to not be disturbed by others. So if for me, I am here, the other person is here, Krishna is here. So now if for me, truly if I'm a serious devotee, if this is my primary relationship, then even if the other person disturbs me, they disturb me, but what happens is I take strength from my vertical relationship and then I maintain my calm. That's why Trunadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna. See, Tarorapi, be tolerant. So, even if the other person is not behaving properly, they are disturbed, don't overreact to it. Now, you hurt me, so I'll hurt you back. No, okay, if you hurt me, what would Krishna want me to do in this situation? How can I best serve Krishna in this situation? So, if we identify more as the servant of Krishna than as a husband or a wife or a parent or a child, whatever, then even if there is disturbance from the other person, but in my response, there is I don't disturb. So the other person may disturb, but I don't disturb back. I stay calm. I stay composed. I stay responsible. Now this of course does not mean that we take abuse from the other person. Then there is a boundary. If somebody is physically abusive, somebody is forcing us to do something which is harmful to us, that means then they are impeding our relationship with Krishna. Then we have to set some boundaries. But in general, if our vertical relationship is strong with Krishna, then even if other people disturb us, we won't get that disturbed. Okay? So, yasman no dvijate loko, one who is not disturbed by others. In this way, over a period of time, the other person will actually see. People are not blind actually. You may think that they are, but they are not. Now they will see, in the past, you were so short-tempered. Now you have become so calm. What is the difference? Oh, you're practicing this bhakti. Maybe this bhakti is a good thing. Or they will also become appreciative of bhakti that way. So I started then, don't tell me what you believe, show me how you behave. So in this way, what is happening is, our one is actually improving our two. So if we are strong in our one, that will become like a buffer for us. It will help us minimize the disturbance. If the other person disturbs, I don't make things worse. I don't escalate. Then I'll talk the last part. Right? We don't be disturbed by others, and how do we not disturb others? So what does that mean? See, quite often, one of the ways we disturb others is, how we may disturb others is by disturbing speech. Disturbing speech means, see, most of us, we live in a relatively cultured society. So we are not going to maybe beat each other up when we are angry. But we can speak harsh words. And sometimes harsh words can break hearts. So how do we avoid this? So what we see is, now we may want the other person to do something and not do something. But when we are presenting it, how do we present that? If we are, Krishna says in 17:15 in the Bhagavad Gita, that speak the truth. We speak the truth, be truthful, but also he says, speak it palatably. Palatable means anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam jayat. So he says, speak the satya But the same word, yasman no udvijate loko. Here Krishna is saying anudvega. Speak in a way that is not agitating. So we may want somebody to do something, but don't force them. Don't insult them if they don't do it. Don't demonize them. Don't say that you're a terrible person because you don't do this. No, be polite, be kind, be sensitive. So rather than thinking, say for example, I'll give one example to conclude this talk, that suppose now we want, if we are practicing bhakti, we want our family also to start practicing bhakti. Now that is good. But how do we go about doing it? I was in the West Indies and I was staying at one devotee's family, and Mataji was telling how she started practicing bhakti, but her husband was not interested at all. And the more she was pushing, the more her husband was saying no. But still, her husband was courteous. When she wanted to go to the temple, her husband would drop her to the temple, but he would not come inside the temple. And she would just wait outside, maybe do some work on the phone or do something like that. And after he pick her up and take her back home. So one day she went into the temple, and then the devotees had brought some truck with some lot of prasadam items. So this one devotee was unloading it, and he saw her husband sitting in the car, and he says, "Can you help me?" I said, "They were unloading all of me." He said, "Yeah, sure." So he came and he started helping. He took the grocery and put it here, put it there. And the devotee and they started talking. So both of them happened to be businessmen. They started talking, and then he said, today we have another festival, so we're a little short of staff. So can you help me in serving the prasad? He said, "Okay, sure." He started serving, and then this Mataji, she attended the program and she came out. And in India, there's a little bit of gender separation, but in the West, it's not so much. The culture there is different. So she said she went in the prasadam queue to take prasad, and her husband was there serving prasad. So she said after that, when I would come in, her husband would come in. He would never attend the class, but he would do some service. And he says, "Okay, I can help you move this. I can help you clean this. I do this." And he says it took her almost 2 years. It took 2 years. He would come and do service but not attend the class. But then finally, he said that we agreed that I wanted to host some visiting preacher. I asked my husband, "Can I?" Initially, he would have outright said no. He said, "Okay." And then they hosted it. They were supposed to host somewhere else, but they couldn't host. That person had some problem. So he said, "Can I stay for one day at our place?" Said, "Okay." And then one day they stayed and they started talking. And that's when one to one they started talking and he started discussing various topics. And this devotee was quite very broad-minded. He started talking about business and how you can spiritualize your business and this and that. And then he started becoming interested in bhakti. He started attending classes thereafter. So it was a gradual approach. The gradual approach, basically what it means is, see, if this is the circle of bhakti, and say this is the circle of interests of the other person. So rather than telling the other person, "You chant Hare Krishna, come to the temple," we try to find out what are the interests of the other person and where they intersect with bhakti. So she later told me my husband had a lot of volunteering spirit. In his childhood, he would go and volunteer at various places. That's why when this devotee asked, "Can you do this? Can you help me in this?" he couldn't say no. But he had no interest in hearing a class. So that way, when we say we don't disturb others, that doesn't simply mean we let them do whatever they want. Rather, we try to make our point in a non-disturbing way. So I was at one devotee's house in America, and his family is brilliant. The Mataji's side, there are 7 PhDs in their family. In the Prabhuji's side, there are 11 PhDs. And their son he was at the age of 8, he won something like the National Math Olympiad or something like that. Brilliant boy. So he was around 11 or 12 when I was at their place, and he was into robotics. And in robotics, he was brilliant. He was a part of at the state level, he had won the state robotics competition and he was going to participate at the national level. So the parents were telling me about the children, and then the parents were saying that, he's brilliant, but he's just not interested in bhakti. I said, okay. Then I started talking with him. So I asked him some questions about robotics. And when he started speaking about robotics, it was like the Ganga was flowing from his mouth. Then he started talking. Then I asked him, when you make these robots in the competitions, what kind of robots do you make? So he said, generally, we make robots with a very high level of mobility and flexibility. The main funding for robotics now is coming from Amazon and companies like that. Amazon wants to have all the packing and the transporting done by robots so that they don't have to pay employees. So he says, a robot which can quickly bend down, quickly get up. So we try to have robots with efficient movements. So I said, okay. He says, do you like, in your competition, do they appreciate if you bring some innovative ideas, you do new kinds of robots? He said, yeah, sure, innovation is always appreciated. So I said, what do you think of making a robot of Krishna speaking the words of the Bhagavad Gita? He said, no, that's not a good idea. That was an instant response. He went away. And then I was talking to his parents, and after 5 minutes, he came back. He said, actually, it's not a bad idea. Nobody else will think of a robot like that. And in America, there's a lot of, in India also in software, there's a lot of emphasis on diversity and inclusivity. He said, yeah, let me think about it. Then after a week, his parents called me. He said, our son is now reading the Bhagavad Gita. He says, not so much he's interested in the Bhagavad Gita, he's interested in which verses from the Gita will sound cool from his robot. So, now, yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshate. Somehow or the other he's become interested in the Gita. So, don't force others. Don't force others doesn't mean that we have to let them do whatever they want. We try to see their interests and then see bhakti and see where the two intersect. So, for that, we need to be a little more open-minded. Bhakti doesn't mean you do this and you don't do this. That's a part of bhakti. But bhakti is much, much bigger than that. So, if we understand that Krishna has a relationship with that person, Krishna has a plan for that person, and wherever that person is right now, they are still under the shelter of Krishna. They may not be aware that they are under the shelter of Krishna, but they are. So let me see among their present interests, what can be connected with Krishna. If we find that, and then we may find some interest, and gradually that person will start moving forward. So in that way, if we speak the truth palatably rather than unpalatably, then that means understand their interests, understand our interests, and try to see where there's an intersection. Then we will find that bhakti can also improve our relationships in the sense that we won't disturb others, but rather we will communicate more sensitively, more effectively. And if now in general, speaking sensitively, that's just a basic, you could say it's a sattvic principle. But when we understand that that person has a relationship with Krishna, I have a relationship with Krishna. So when I'm with this person, it's not just by chance. It's not just, sometimes we are in a bad relationship, we feel. It's not just misfortune or bad karma. It might be good karma, it might be bad karma. But more important is that it is our karma works under Krishna's plan. Karma is not independent of Krishna. That means that I am in this particular job, I am in this particular relationship, that is within Krishna's plan. And Krishna has some purpose. If this person is very difficult, there is something which Krishna wants me to learn. There's some way which Krishna wants me to grow. If we have that faith, then we won't become resentful, we won't become bitter, we won't become closed. Even if that person doesn't respond immediately, we will maintain our service attitude. And that way, gradually, we can help that person come closer to Krishna and that person come closer to us. I'll conclude with this point that Srila Prabhupada, when he started ISKCON, one of the 7 purposes of ISKCON he said is the same point. I got this idea of these three things from the one of the seven purposes of ISKCON. Prabhupada says the purpose of ISKCON is to bring people closer to Krishna and closer to each other. That means Prabhupada doesn't just want this to be improved and this to be improved. But Prabhupada wants this also to be improved. 1, 2 and 3. We want to come to closer to each other and closer to Krishna. This is this understanding, acting with service attitude. By practicing Bhagavad Gita and Bhakti, we can definitely improve our relationships. I'll summarize what I discussed today. The three main points. The first was, I discussed about how Bhakti reconceptualizes. I talked about reconceptualizing our Bhakti. Our Bhakti, Krishna says, if you want to be dear to Krishna, it's not just our devotional activities that are important. What Krishna says is, it's our behavior also, practical behavior also. Krishna says it's important. And this will also make us dear to Krishna. That was the 12-15 verse. So, in general, we may tend to disturb each other, but Krishna says if you don't disturb, even if you are not a devotee, Krishna is saying you are dear to me. What to speak if you are a devotee? So, we are reconceptualizing Bhakti. It's not just our devotional activity, but also a behavior that is important. And second point I talked about is how if Bhakti is, the Gita and Bhakti is misapplied, it can worsen our relationships. And I talk that in terms of, one maybe we might become hard-hearted. That if you consider this whole class is summarized in this one diagram, that Krishna, I and the other person. So 1, 2, 3. So if we become hard-hearted, if we reject 2, we trivialize 2, we become hard-hearted, that will damage our relationships. It can also worsen if we force 3. That can also, so detachment does not mean that we don't care for the other person. Detachment simply means when that person wants us to do something that is bad for us, we are ready to say no. Attachment means that we are clear-headed, that we make one more important than 2, not that we make 2 utterly unimportant. And then third part I discuss is how when it is applied, Bhakti can improve our relationships. In this I talked about two main points. The first point I talked about is that our Bhakti can act as a buffer for us. I gave the example of the salesperson, that if our relationship with Krishna is strong, that's our primary relationship, then even the other person disturbing, we won't disturb them back. We will stay calm. So our one can act as a buffer. And then secondly, so that way we are not disturbed by others. So, and not disturbed. That's what happened. And then we talked about not disturbing others. That was especially in dealing with 3. What we do is we try to investigate and negotiate. We try to understand rather than forcing that person to do something and not do something. We try to find their interests. We try to find our interests and try to find an intersection point. So this we need to, in one sense, investigate. Be open-minded. Try to understand the other person. Try to understand Krishna's plan for that person. And then, after that, we negotiate. That person may not be ready to do one thing. The husband was not ready to hear a class, but he was ready to do some sales. The child was not ready to chant, but was ready to study the Bhagavad Gita. So we investigate, we negotiate, and then we can communicate in a way that does not disturb others. And in this way, our bhakti can improve our relationships. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Actually, I was writing so many things on paper to summarize, but you have very beautifully summarized. Thank you so much. And it has cleared so many misconceptions, isn't it? Haribol. So thank you so much, Prabhuji. And before that, I request everyone to stay back. There are very important announcements. Radhesham Prabhu had said that very soon we are going to form Vanaprastha group. Haribol. So Vanaprastha group means those devotees whose responsibilities, family responsibilities are not there and they have a lot of free time to give for Krishna consciousness. So this group will be formed and there will be a special services for this group and also many special classes will be given by Radheshyam Prabhu, some camps also. So this group will be formed and more details will be given to all the devotees by your respective Bhakti Vriksha leaders. तो हम अभी भक्ति वृक्षास में जो भी भक्ति वृक्ष के सदस्य है हम एक वानप्रस्थ ग्रुप बनाने जा रहे हैं तो आपके भक्ति वृक्ष लीडर्स और उसका इंफॉर्मेशन ज्यादा आपको देंगे आपके भक्ति वृक्ष में राधेश्याम प्रभु रेगुलरली क्लासेस लेंगे आपके लिए और स्पेशल सेवास रहेंगे वो ग्रुप के लिए तो ये आपके भक्ति वृक्ष में बताया जाएगा వానప్రస్థ గ్రూప్ మనం ఫామ్ చేయబోతున్నాం తొందరలో మీ భక్తి వృక్ష లీడర్స్ మీకు దాని గురించి చెప్తారు ఇంకా ఫర్దర్గా సో నెక్స్ట్ వీక్ క్లాస్ వీ హ్యావ్ వన్ మోర్ స్పెషల్ క్లాస్ by His Grace Dwarkadish Prabhu and Her Grace Vishaka Priya Mataji. Hari Wo. So, how many of you heard their classes before? Many of you have heard. सभी बहुत भक्तों ने सुन चुके हैं उनके classes. So, the topic is very attractive topic. I can say almost similar to